Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. We are here for Clear Road's final webinar. These are requirements of all Clear Road's projects. Near the end of the project, we go ahead and have conduct a final webinar to sort of go over the process and the results of the project. Today, we're here for Clear Road's project 1502, which is identification and recommendations for correction of equipment factors causing fatigue in snowplow operators. The principal investigator is Virginia Tech, and we've got Jeff Hickman and Matt Camden on the call with us today, and they're going to be going over the results of this project. Just a couple, or at least one housekeeping note is first of all, there will be two. One is we're currently recording this webinar, and then we will go ahead afterwards, post it on the Clear Road's website on the project page for those to view it who weren't able to be here today. But the other note is that I've muted everybody, and that will continue to stay muted throughout the call. And so if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and enter them into the chat box, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll circle back around and read those questions out and try and get responses to those questions at the end. All right, so with that, I'm gonna turn things over to Matt Camden, and go ahead, Matt, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, and we appreciate Clear Road's giving us the opportunity to work on this project. I think fatigue in snowplow operations is a critical aspect, and it hasn't been thoroughly studied before our previous work several years ago. So we do appreciate the opportunity, and I think this is a great project and some useful information coming from it. So as Greg mentioned, this project was looking at fatigue, specifically equipment factors causing fatigue in snowplow operations. There were really kind of two objectives. The first was to identify snowplow equipment factors that contribute to the development of operator fatigue. And then the second objective was to provide cost-effective, realistic recommendations to reduce or eliminate that fatigue caused by snowplow equipment during winter operations. So before we get started, I'll just give a brief overview of what fatigue is, and when we talk about fatigue, kind of what the various topics we're discussing. So there's two types of fatigue. The first is sleep-related fatigue, and this is kind of what a lot of people think about when we're talking about fatigue. So this is when an operator or an individual becomes tired based on what time of day it is or their biological circadian rhythms. Basically, circadian rhythms are every single individual typically gets tired around the same time each day. Typically, this is between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And then there's also a shorter circadian rhythm in the afternoon, kind of after lunchtime. Sleep-related fatigue could also be caused by sleep deprivation, so not getting enough sleep, sleep restriction, so not sleeping when you normally are sleeping, and then also untreated sleep disorders such as sleep apnea. The other type of fatigue is task-related fatigue. So this is when we become tired because we're doing something or because we're not doing something. So there are two types of task-related fatigue. Active task-related fatigue is when we become tired because typically we're doing a lot of something. So this could be caused by having an increased workload or being cognitively overloaded. In terms of driving, this could be the result of having to plow in high-density traffic, or having to plow when the visibility is really, really hard to see through. It also could be caused by having to do secondary things while you're driving. So control the spreader, control the plow when there is a lot of traffic on the road and while you're just trying to plow and stay on the road to begin with. The second type of task-related fatigue is what we call passive task-related fatigue. And this is really when we become tired because we're bored or when we are cognitively underloaded. So in terms of driving, this could be during a monotonous drive. So maybe it's in the middle of the night. There's no other cars around. It's a straight road. So there's not much going on. And after an extended period of time, we can become just tired just by doing the same thing repetitively over and over again. Also, passive task-related fatigue can be caused by automation or disengagement. So the driver's are used to having to do multiple things at a time, but now because of automation and we have new technology, it could be that the drivers are no longer actively engaged in the task and they can become tired. So the first aspect of this project was to conduct a literature review, looking at all the previous research that had been done on fatigue and equipment and snowplow operations. And this really was expanding the previous study we did in 2014. So for this project, we specifically focused on how driver workload, vehicle vibration, noise, visibility, and lighting, distraction, and automated technologies all are associated with fatigue in snowplow operations. So in terms of workload, and as we saw when we were talking about passive and task-related fatigue, research has shown that high workload and low workload are both associated with people perceiving to be tired. And this is related to many different types of equipment and tasks in snowplow operations. So this is kind of an underlying factor that may impact different types of equipment while operating a snowplow. In terms of vibration, research has shown that monotonous low-frequency vibrations, typically around 3 Hertz, have been associated with an increase in fatigue. In terms of specific types of equipment, air ride seats or vibration dampening seats, operators do say that decrease fatigue. Also, the same with rubber blades have been shown to decrease fatigue as well by limiting those low-frequency vibrations that are experienced in the cab. Then also the use of tire chains, because the chains are on the road, they are causing these low-frequency vibrations and therefore increase fatigue. Regarding noise, it's very similar to vibration. So low-frequency, continuous sound has been found to increase operator fatigue, but then intermittent and high-frequency sounds have been actually shown to decrease fatigue. So in terms of different types of equipment, increasing cab insulation will help eliminate some of those low-frequency, continuous sounds that are coming from outside the cab. And then music and radio would be this intermittent sound, has been shown to actually decrease fatigue. Also, different types of alerts that could be coming from various pieces of equipment or controls inside the cab would technically be these intermittent high-frequency sounds that can actually decrease fatigue themselves. Regarding lighting and visibility, poor visibility has been shown to increase fatigue. This is really getting back to the active task-related fatigue. So you're cognitively overloaded because you're having to work harder to see through poor visibility conditions. There are also some research out there looking at the types of lighting inside the cab. And there is some mixed research looking at the color of lighting inside the cab. So for instance, NASA has used short wavelength light, specifically blue wavelength light, to decrease astronauts' fatigue. There is some research looking at blue lights and the effect on fatigue in drivers. And that research shows that it may be effective, but it's really kind of inconclusive at this stage. Research has also shown that where we place exterior lighting can decrease fatigue. So if we put exterior lighting away from driver's line of sight with a small beam spread, so kind of spotlights, can actually decrease fatigue by eliminating some of the driver eye strain and glare. And then finally, the use of snow deflectors by eliminating the blowback snow that falls on the windshield can decrease fatigue itself. We also looked at different types of communication devices that can be used inside the cab. And research looking at the use of communication devices in long-haul trucking have been found that talking on a cell phone or CB or DOT radio can actually decrease fatigue. And this is basically the drivers are tired in monotonous conditions, doing the same thing for extended periods of time. If they can actually contact somebody, whether it's a coworker on a CB radio or by calling their family, they can actually kind of increase their alertness by mixing up their task. And then finally, we looked at advanced technologies, and there is some research showing that these advanced technologies may decrease workload and by decreasing the workload, they can decrease fatigue. So we can look at collision avoidance systems. These would be different types of systems to alert drivers of obstacles in front of them, or different types of systems alerting them when they're traveling outside their intended path. So it could be lane departure warning systems or forward collision warning systems. And then also automated vehicle locators. Basically, these advanced systems would give the drivers more information to help aid their decision-making processes. So by doing that, we can decrease their workload and hopefully decrease fatigue. So we used all the previous research to develop a questionnaire that we sent out to snowplow operators. This questionnaire asked the operators their experience in snowplow operations, what type of equipment they used, how frequently they became fatigued while operating a plow, what type of shifts and when those shifts occurred. And then specifically, we asked them what type of equipment caused vibration. We also asked about noise-related equipment, visibility-related equipment, other just in general in-cab types of equipment. And then we opened it up to provide the operators with opportunities to provide just open-ended comments for suggestions to decrease fatigue during snowplow operations. So we worked with ClearRoad member states to distribute the questionnaire. I contacted each of the ClearRoad member states, sent them a link to an online version of the questionnaire, and those representatives then distributed the questionnaire out to the operators within their respective state. If the representative from ClearRoad said their operators did not have reliable access to the internet, we also provided a paper-based version of the questionnaire. And those questionnaires were collected and sent back to us, and we entered them into an online database. We had really good response. We did some chi-square analyses. We also did some paired sample t-tests. And then we looked at all the open-ended questions and comments and did a content analysis. And we'll talk kind of about all the results here coming up. So as I mentioned, we had a really good response. We had over 2,000 operators respond to the questionnaire. At the time we distributed the questionnaire, there were 23 ClearRoad member states. We distributed the questionnaire to 28 of those 29 ClearRoad member states, and we got responses back from 23 of the states. So this is really good response. In the previous project we had about 1,500 operators, so we got almost 500 more operators from the previous study. And here's the map. You can see all the states where we received responses back from. In terms of the operators that did respond to the survey, almost all of them were employees of the state DOT. The majority of them had significant experience, more than 10 years experience in snowplow operations. Most worked a shift that was a combination of daytime hours and nighttime hours. And the vast majority of them used a variety of vehicle types. They used a dump with multiple plows and multiple spreaders. They used tractors, pickup trucks, really a wide variety of vehicles. And the graph here shows the shift lengths of the operators who responded to the questionnaire. The most common shift length was 12 hours, but we also had a lot of operators work shifts between 8 and 12 hours and then 12 to 16 hours. I do want to point out that we did have approximately 10% of operators say they work longer shifts, 16 or more hours in length. The next question was asking them how frequently the operators experienced fatigue or became tired during snowplow operations. The main takeaway here is that 94% of all the operators who responded to the question said they became tired at some point when they were operating a snowplow. You can also see approximately 35% of the drivers said they became fatigued at least half the time, if not more frequently. And then approximately 15% of the drivers said they were tired most of the time or always while operating a snowplow. So this is a prevalent problem, an issue that operators are constantly dealing with. So it's a really good project and it's a worthwhile topic that needs to be looked at. Next, we looked at fatigue based on when the operator shifts were occurring. So this top table, just to kind of get you oriented, the left-hand column is how often the operators became tired, and we broke it down into day shift people, night shift people, and operators who worked a shift that had both daytime hours and nighttime hours. And what you can see here is that basically the operators who worked the nighttime shift or the shift with a combination of daytime and nighttime hours were reporting higher levels of fatigue, and this was confirmed through statistical analyses. So just as an example, if we look at those operators who said they were always tired, so that the first white line in the top table up there, 1.5% of the operators who work daytime hours said they always became tired. But when we go over to the operators who work nighttime hours, you can see that 5.5%. So really 3 times as many operators who work nighttime shifts were reporting always becoming tired. And you can see the same kind of trend there for most of the time fatigue, and same with half the time fatigue. So the analyses showed that the operators who work nighttime shifts, as kind of expected, based on our biological clocks, report higher levels of fatigue. We also looked at fatigue by shift length, and I think this graph really shows a really good trend, an important trend when we're talking about fatigue in snowplow operations. So if you look at the really light color, or kind of almost teal color bars, or section of the bars, those are operators who say they never become tired. And if you just look at this first bar over on the left for the shift length less than 8 hours, you can see that approximately 20% of those operators say they never become fatigued. And as you go across the graph to the right, you can see that teal part of the bar becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, all the way to the operators who work more than 16-hour long shifts. Very small percentage, approximately 2% of those operators said they never become tired. But if we go down and look at the opposite end of the spectrum, the operators who say they always become tired, for those operators who work shifts less than 8 hours, none of those operators said they were always tired. But if you go all the way over to the right, there was a significant portion, about 20% of the operators who work shifts longer than 16 hours said they were always tired. So this graph just shows that as shift length increased, reported fatigue also increased. And this was confirmed by our statistical analyses. Basically, shifts 16 hours or more in length were associated with increased levels of fatigue, as reported by the operators. So the next part of the questionnaire looks specifically at vibration-related equipment. And just in general, you can see approximately 50% of the operators said they became tired because of some sort of vibration caused by equipment on or inside the plow. And next, we asked them about specific types of equipment that may be related to vibration. So on the left column of the table, you can see the specific type of equipment. The next column labeled N is how many operators responded to the question for that piece of equipment. The next column, titled average rating, is how frequently fatigue was associated with that piece of equipment. So a rating of 1 was that piece of equipment never increased fatigue, and a rating of 5 was that piece of equipment always increased fatigue. So lower average ratings were good, higher average ratings were bad. The next column, called the T statistic, was the result of the statistical analyses. So basically, the higher the T statistic, the greater the impact. Negative T statistics were associated with decreasing fatigue, and positive T statistics were associated with increasing fatigue. And those pieces of equipment that are highlighted, either green or red, were the types of equipment that operators found significantly impacted fatigue. So if an equipment type is not highlighted, basically the operators said that it did not impact fatigue really whatsoever. So the green highlighted equipment types were found to be associated with decreased fatigue, and the red highlighted equipment types were found to be associated with increased fatigue. So air cushioned seats, air suspended seats, rubber encased blades, blade float devices, and segmented blades were all reported to decrease fatigue, while the use of non-automatic tire chains, so traditional tire chains, and the use of the front plow were found or reported to actually increase fatigue. Oops. The next question looked at providing open-ended comments regarding vibration-related types of equipment. And I apologize that this graph's kind of getting messed up here with the numbers. But basically, we had 32% of all the open-ended questions were related to the truck. So these comments were mostly related to purchasing a new truck. The operators said by purchasing a new truck, we could get rid of all the unnecessary vibration. A lot of other comments suggested the use of an air ride suspension on the truck to help eliminate the road type of vibrations. We also had approximately 20% of the comments related to the use of rubber blades. And then 21% of the comments also were associated with a more comfortable seat. The vast majority of those comments suggested the use of an air ride or vibration dampening seat to improve and eliminate the vibration. The next part of the questionnaire focused on equipment-related noise and how it relates to fatigue. And very similar to vibration, you can see approximately 50% of the operators said noise does impact their level of fatigue at least some of the time. A very small percentage, 1.5%, said it always impacted fatigue. Here are the results for the specific types of equipment. You can see that noise from the plow, noise from the engine, and then having the radio or music inside the cab turned off, all were associated with increased levels of fatigue. While having the radio or music inside the cab turned on, the use of a CB radio or DOT radio, and then audible alerts from snow and ice and safety equipment inside the cab were all found to decrease levels of fatigue. When we looked at the open-ended comments, the vast majority, 39% of all comments we got related to equipment-related noise, suggested some sort of truck solution or external equipment solution, specifically the use of increased cab insulation to eliminate exterior noise that would be coming inside the cab. We also had a lot of operators suggest just putting the window up, or the use of rubber encased blades as a way to not only decrease the vibration, but also decrease the noise. And then we had approximately 60% comments just saying using or installing a radio or making sure all equipment for snowplow operations had a working radio or CD player available in the cab. It really helped to decrease their levels of tiredness. Next questions were associated with visibility. If we look at the relationship between visibility and fatigue, you can see much higher levels of fatigue reported due to poor visibility. Almost 75% of all operators said visibility did impact their level of tiredness throughout their shift. And almost 9% of operators said poor visibility always increased their level of tiredness. So if we think back to vibration and noise, only 1.5% of those operators said noise or vibration increased fatigue all the time. Here we have 9%, so much higher levels of fatigue associated with poor visibility. Regarding specific types of equipment, anti-glare glass, heated mirrors, heated windshield, heated windows, and the use of a snow deflector were all said to decrease levels of tiredness. So basically any type of equipment that improved visibility or decreased the snow and ice buildup on the glass inside the cab or on the outside of the cab were all found or said to be reducing fatigue. And then exterior strobe or flashing lights, interior vehicle lighting, and then traditional windshield wiper blades were said to increase fatigue. Regarding the specific types of visibility related comments that we received, a lot of them had to do with the wiper system. So the operators were saying that the traditional wiper blades typically found on snowplow equipment really did not do a great job eliminating or improving the visibility of the driver. Most of the time we got comments saying that the operators had to kind of stand up, roll down the window, and reach their hands outside the vehicle while driving to brush the snow and ice off the front windshield. So obviously, you know, that's kind of a safety concern. We don't want drivers standing up and reaching outside the window while they're operating the plow. So if we can have improved wiper systems and a defrost system, then our visibility should increase. And then finally, we asked about in-cab types of equipment and how they relate to fatigue. 50% of the operators said different types of in-cab equipment impacted their level of tiredness throughout the shifts. A very small percentage, less than 1%, said in-cab equipment always increased fatigue. So if we just go and look at the categories, visibility was the main concern regarding equipment and fatigue, and then vibration, noise, and this in-cab equipment in general were concerned. There was 50% of the operators said it did impact fatigue, but on a lower level. Regarding specific types of equipment, the placement of equipment controls, so where controls were placed and the number of controls, and then also where LCD displays were placed inside the cab, and the light from LCD displays all increased fatigue, while the use of a mobile phone or the presence of a collision avoidance system such as forward collision warning, or a system that would assist the drivers staying inside their lane, or the use of a backup camera were all said to actually decrease fatigue. Most of the comments we received regarding in-cab equipment were associated with the monitors inside the cab or interior lighting, and almost all the comments were saying that the monitor or the interior lights were very bright, causing a distraction or even providing a glare on the inside of the windows or the windshield. And it was distracting and causing really poor visibility and increased eye strain and discomfort. So the operators mainly were saying if we could have dimmable lighting and dimmable monitors all the way down to turning the monitors to near blackness would greatly benefit and decrease driver fatigue. We also had a number of comments, again, regarding the seat. So having a more comfortable seat helped them so they didn't have back pain after really long shifts. And then also cab design, essentially this was increasing the leg room, were the majority of those comments. Finally, we just provided the operators with the opportunity to provide additional comments or suggestions on how to improve or eliminate fatigue in snowplow operations. About 25% of all the comments kind of just rehashed things that operators had already said. Over 500 comments were providing just in general countermeasures to fatigue. So we had 100 comments suggesting just make sure operators get the proper rest while off duty. 150 comments suggested taking a break occasionally and walking around the truck to get some fresh air. We also had a number of comments suggesting drinking coffee or opening a window. And we also had comments suggesting to make sure operators had got exercise or maintain a good health diet, in addition to comments already provided in other types of countermeasures. So after we got all the ratings from the questionnaires, we developed a prioritized scale of equipment or sources of fatigue. So based on how many comments the operators provided for sources of fatigue and how they rated those sources of fatigue, we kind of developed an ordinal ranking for the sources of fatigue. So based on the number of comments and their rating, operators said silence was their #1 source of fatigue. So essentially having the radio turned off was the vast majority of these comments. Then bright interior lighting, then standard wipers, poor auxiliary lighting, an old seat, a standard defrost system, limited cab insulation, traditional blades or plows, warning lights, regardless of whether they were strobes or flashers, equipment controls, the worn out vehicle suspension, halogen light bulbs, and traditional tire chains. So if we just look at this, the main sources of fatigue were not having a radio, bright interior lighting, substandard or traditional wiper blades that just didn't really do a good job of eliminating the snow and ice buildup, and then auxiliary lighting, and then old seats. So next we wanted to look at and try to estimate the cost benefit associated with possible solutions to eliminate fatigue due to equipment factors. We couldn't do a traditional cost benefit analysis because we didn't have specifics on how each type of equipment would eliminate crashes or improve vehicle maintenance. So we couldn't do the traditional full benefit cost analyses. So instead what we tried to do was just give an estimate of how each possible solution to equipment fatigue either increased fatigue. So we want solutions that eliminate fatigue, not increase fatigue. And we also estimated the cost, including installation time for each possible solution. And then finally, we rated each possible solution for how effective that solution would be to eliminate fatigue. So just when we go through, basically a 1 in each category is good. So a solution that may not increase fatigue really at all, was low cost and highly effective, was the most desirable outcome. Things that had low effectiveness, so a 5 on effectiveness, a high cost, and had the potential to increase fatigue for a lot of people too, those were undesirable possible solutions. So what we did was we looked at all the solutions. There were 19 of them, general solutions offered by the operators, and we ranked them based on the risk to increase fatigue, the cost, and then the effectiveness. So as I said before, lower numbers are better here. And you can see that install a music or a CD player in all equipment had a low risk to increase fatigue. Basically, operators could turn it off if they don't like it, turn it on if they felt like they did need some sort of music or radio to listen to. It's fairly low cost, less than $500, including installation, and fairly effective at preventing fatigue for short periods of time. And also having some sort of device to communicate with their coworkers, whether it's a Bluetooth radio or CB radio, fairly low risk to increase fatigue, low cost, and fairly highly effective. As you're looking at these suggestions here, these are just the possible solutions. They're not our final recommendations, so just keep that in mind. Other possible solutions was using a nighttime dimmer switch for forward-facing warning lights. Basically, the operators were saying the warning lights blind them, especially if there is hard snow at the time. So the lights reflecting back to the operators. So if they could decrease the brightness of those forward-facing lights during the nighttime, that would be very beneficial. So low risk to increase fatigue, fairly low cost, and fairly high effectiveness. Also heated wipers, heated windshield, snow deflectors, increasing noise suppression inside the cab, the use of rubber encased blades, and the use of a plow float controller or device. Mainly, all of them were fairly low risk to increase fatigue, fairly low cost, and most of them were decently effective, some more than others, at preventing fatigue. Here are the next 10 possible equipment solutions. You can see here, fairly similar things, fairly low cost, fairly low risk to actually increase fatigue, and then a range for effectiveness. But the possible solutions included dimmable interior lighting, the use of an anti-glare visor, mounting auxiliary lighting on the passenger side, so away from the driver's line of sight, using narrow beam auxiliary lighting, having a more ergonomically designed seat that includes some sort of vibration dampening or air ride technology, consolidating interior displays, so there's not 5 displays inside the cab. Now there's only 1 or 2 that can have and present the driver with the same information. Limiting the use of tire chains, so instead of using tire chains all the time, only using them when absolutely necessary. Having an air ride or vibration dampening suspension on the truck. Using LED bulbs on all exterior lighting. And then finally, purchasing a new truck. So obviously, purchasing a new truck, you're not going to just go out and say, oh, our operators are becoming tired, let's buy a new truck. Basically, this is an important thing. It's very costly, but when you are going through and purchasing a new truck, it's very likely that you can request having LED bulbs or having an air ride seat or air ride suspension. So when you're purchasing a new truck, it's possible you can get multiple solutions and kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So you're getting a lot of solutions when you're purchasing the new truck. So that's why it would technically be highly effective. So just kind of in general, we saw 94% of all the operators said they become fatigued at least some of the time. Almost 15% of those operators said they become fatigued almost all the time or always. So a lot of drivers are experiencing fatigue. So it does make sense to look at the various things that cause fatigue and how we can eliminate some of that fatigue. Shifts that were 16 hours or more in length were associated with the most fatigue. And then also night shifts had higher levels of fatigue compared to day shifts. Regarding operators' specific suggestions on how to reduce fatigue, operators said improve the vehicle suspension, use a blade float device, have rubber encased blades, limiting the use of tire chains, having an air ride seat were all possible ways to reduce those low frequency vibrations that have been found to increase operator fatigue. Through the use of increased insulation or equipment alerts or a communication device or a radio or music inside the cab, we could use noise or eliminate noise to improve operators' level of fatigue. Regarding visibility, the use of dimmable warning lights or LEDs or snow deflectors, heated wipers, and a heated windshield would all provide better equipment to improve visibility for the operators. And then for in-cab solutions, just having dimmable LCDs would eliminate a lot of the eye strain and glare inside the cab and eliminate some of the how distracting the LCDs are in general. So taking the operator's suggestion and looking at our cost-benefit estimations, we came up with a list of recommendations for equipment factors to eliminate fatigue. The first was using dimmable interior lighting, including the LCDs. So by having a dimmer switch or using LCDs that have a capability to be dimmed, operators could be instructed to increase or decrease brightness as needed. So operators, when it's daytime, they could increase brightness, and at nighttime, they could decrease brightness to help eliminate that glare and eye strain. Second recommendation was to use LED bulbs for all exterior lighting. So LED lighting has been found to improve visibility. We did see a lot of comments from operators saying they were driving next to a light vehicle, and the light vehicle's lights provided greater visibility than the plow truck's lights. So the operators were saying, you know, it's ridiculous that the light vehicles have better visibility when our truck is designed to operate in limited visibility in poor conditions. So these operators suggested using LED bulbs, which were fairly inexpensive. And then LED bulbs also have the added benefit, if used in the warning lights, to provide dimmable warning lights. In other words, a nighttime setting for the forward-facing warning lights. So this would eliminate that glare and the bounce back light. The operators said provided a lot of eye strain and fatigue. The fourth recommendation was to install a CD player or a satellite radio inside all operations. This was the highest rated solution that all the operators provided to us. So a simple AM/FM radio would work in most locations. We did have a lot of operators say that where they plow, radio signal is not great, so it would be possible to have a satellite radio, maybe better. Once they did say that they offer a satellite radio, but the operators have to pay for that monthly subscription, so that would be a possibility. When we do make the recommendation for a CD player or some sort of music inside the cab, it is necessary to say that this is a short-term solution to fatigue. Research shows that listening to music that the operator prefers does decrease fatigue, but that decrease in fatigue only lasts approximately 10 to 15 minutes. So it's long enough for an operator to pull over on the side of the road, get to a stopping place, and be able to get out of the cab, get some fresh air, or possibly get a cup of coffee. The next recommendation was through the use of a heated windshield. So winter maintenance vehicles should be or could be equipped with a heated windshield. Heated windshields have been found to greatly reduce the buildup of snow and ice. So the heated windshield also would eliminate some of the discomfort that operators have with the traditional defrost system. Operators suggested the use of the heated windshield because right now they would have to turn the heat up really high in order to eliminate the snow and ice buildup, making the inside of the cab very uncomfortable, which itself can create fatigue. Operators also suggested running a cold cab, so basically running the air conditioning, keeping the windshield cold, so that would eliminate the snow and ice buildup, but being cold inside the cab actually increases fatigue as well. So if we could recommend an piece of equipment that does exist that would provide a more comfortable in-cab environment, would be very beneficial to the operators. Another low-cost solution is simply using snow deflectors. Snow deflectors have been shown to reduce the snow and ice buildup on the windshield. So by using the snow deflector, we can have less issues with how much snow is getting blown up onto the windshield, improving the operator's visibility. We also recommend using narrow beam auxiliary lighting, basically with LEDs to provide greater visibility in poor conditions. And then finally, an ergonomically designed vibration dampening seat to eliminate those low frequency 3 hertz vibrations that would be coming from the outside of the cab and transitioning to the operators through the seat. And although this project did look specifically at equipment related factors, we do know that sleep is a main part, and employer operator wellness is a big factor in the development of fatigue. So we did also offer a number of non-equipment recommendations based on previous research that has been done in snowplow operations or in the truck industry. So we recommend a 15-minute break at least once every 4 to 5 hours. And this is really no cost solution. Operators typically need to go back to their garage or terminal probably every 4 or 5 hours, if not more frequently. So anytime the operators go back, or if they're at the end of their route, just get out of their cab, walk around, get some fresh air for 15 minutes. It is an effective solution, and it really doesn't cost anything other than the employee's time. We also suggest including some sort of education for operators to identify signs of fatigue. Research has shown that individuals are pretty poor at identifying fatigue at the early stages. Typically, we don't notice we become fatigued until it's really too late to do anything. So if we can provide education to drivers to identify those really early signs of fatigue, they can take steps and use countermeasures early in the development of fatigue to eliminate it. Fortunately, there's a free program out there that VTTI actually helped develop for the trucking industry. It's called the North American Fatigue Management Program, and it's freely accessible information. All you have to do is go to the website, sign up, and you can download PowerPoint presentations with a narrative and with audio. It's already packaged, even though it was designed for the trucking industry. All the fatigue related information is all the same. So it's already been developed. It's free. And it does provide a lot of really good information for operators to just identify the signs of fatigue and the importance of fatigue while driving. We also recommend limiting shift lengths to 12 hours. Research has consistently shown in the trucking industry that after 11 hours, fatigue does develop fairly significantly and crash rates significantly increase. So if we can limit shift lengths to 12 hours, it should significantly help. We also saw that shifts 16 or more hours long were associated with more fatigue. So if we can limit it to 12 hours, that would be great. If this isn't possible due to reductions in staff or the amount of operators you have available or how many trucks you have available, we do recommend requiring more frequent and longer breaks. So if a driver does have to work 16 hours, requiring that driver to take 30-minute breaks to an hour, it does give them an opportunity to get a good meal or maybe even take a quick 30-minute nap. We also recommend each agency create a fatigue management policy. This will just outline any recommendations or policies relating to driver fatigue, whether it's how many breaks they should take, or a statement saying that you as an agency do encourage operators to take breaks to eliminate fatigue. It really just puts it in place and provides a written testament of your agency and provides the drivers an opportunity to see that you are interested and committed to reducing fatigue. And then the final recommendations were just providing more notification to drivers in the event of a swing shift. So these drivers would be people who normally work day shifts, but in the event of a winter emergency, they work a night shift. So operators typically would come in to their normal day shifts before the start of a winter emergency. If you can provide operators with additional notification, best case scenario would not have them come in the morning before they work that night shift. But if you could at least give operators maybe 8 hours prior notice to allow them to get a good rest, to get a good meal before working that night shift. Also, encouraging drivers to have a better diet and get more exercise has been shown to decrease fatigue. Also, encouraging drivers and seeking driver input before making equipment decisions. The operators are the ones out there using the equipment every day. They have the most experience with it. So if you could just ask their input, it's quite likely that you're going to get some feedback that management may not have thought of regarding equipment and fatigue. And then finally, if possible, have a dedicated place for operators to rest at each of the garages. Maybe it's a room with just a bunk or two that operators can go where it's dark and quiet. They can lay down for 30 minutes if they are working longer shifts. It does provide them an opportunity to get some sleep because sleep really is the only surefire way to eliminate fatigue. So that's all I have. I look forward to any questions. I'll do my best to answer them.
All right, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. So we did have some people enter in some questions in the chat box, so I'll go ahead and read off a couple of those. The first one is from Scott Lucas of Ohio, and he makes the comment. He says, we want to be aware that we cannot use cell phones on CDL vehicles. Just a comment.
Yeah, Scott, that's a really good comment. So as I mentioned, those possible solutions that did include a cell phone, those were just suggestions from the operators themselves. So it's quite likely that those operators were in states where it may be possible to use a cell phone, but because we didn't want to provide a recommendation that didn't apply to all the clear road states, using a cell phone was not in our final recommendations. So yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so the next, we do actually have a question here, and that comes from Clay Adams of Kansas, and it's kind of an interesting one. He says, how does an operator determine what is leading to their fatigue?
Yeah, so it's really kind of just based on their opinion. And it's obviously going to range on how much knowledge that driver has of fatigue in general. Obviously, if we can provide more education to the drivers, their estimations of what leads to fatigue would probably be more appropriate. But if we just think ourselves and when we get tired, we can make a pretty good estimate of maybe why we're tired. We've done a lot of work that day. It's been stressful. We had to concentrate really hard. So we just kind of think to ourselves, and we can make pretty good estimates of what would be causing fatigue.
Okay. Then we've got another question from Scott Lucas again of Ohio. He says, I'm curious on how a front plow causes fatigue and a wing or tow plow does not.
Yeah, so we didn't get any specific comments differentiating between wing plows or front plows or belly plows. Let me go back to that slide. So one thing to point out here, if you look at the average rating, they're really kind of right there in the middle. We also had fewer people. If you look at the second column N, fewer people actually responded to the questions on the belly plow and the tow plow. We did get a decent amount actually responding to the wing plow. But it's possible that these additional plows reduce the workload. So, you know, if you're being able to plow a greater area than just with the front plow, it could, you know, reduce the operator's workload and therefore reduce their level of fatigue. I think the front plow is the most commonly experienced, and I think that most operators said the front plow increased fatigue just through possibly the vibrations or the noise associated with having the plow on the ground.
Okay, the final question we have here is from Mike Miller in Montana. He says, do you have any data on how the level of traffic volume affected fatigue?
Yeah, I don't specifically have any data regarding density traffic and the development of fatigue. It makes sense that there may be something there regarding traffic density and the development of fatigue. It's a bit, you're going to get into some interactions because typically the fatigue develops at night, and at night are lower level density of traffic. So there probably would be some interaction there. Also, rush hour in the morning is kind of the tail end of that circadian low. So that's actually a pretty bad time to be driving. You're at the end of your circadian low, so you're worn out, but then you have all this increased traffic. So increased traffic does present more opportunities to be involved in a crash, obviously, when you are tired. But to answer the question, I don't specifically have anything.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unmute everybody because that's the last of the questions on the chat box. And since we have a couple more minutes, we can open it up to any other final questions, any other final questions we may have. So, all right. Looks like everybody is unmuted. Yes, go ahead.
Greg, just a real quick comment from California. I think the tow plow and the wing plow, it's less of the boredom factor doesn't come in. I think you're busier. That's why the fatigue factor is a little bit less. Just a comment.
Okay. Cliff Spoonmore from Wyoming also entered in a note on the chat box saying, can we make recommendations on changing the time we start shift changes?
Can you repeat that question again, Greg?
Yeah, sure. It's from Cliff Spoonmore in Wyoming. He said, can we make recommendations on changing the time we start shift changes?
Yeah, so would that be, just to make sure I'm clear, talking about when the shift starts? Is that what the question's asking?
That's what it sounds like to me. And everyone's unmuted, so Cliff, if you want to make that more clear, you can go ahead and talk.
I was in the middle of that when you started to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
The idea is sometimes we got some groups that change shifts at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, trying to, do they break up the normal sleep cycle, or is it worse if we do that and they run a 12-hour shift?
Yeah, so there is some research looking at that, and it's best to avoid shift start times between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. So when people are usually in that circadian low, it's very difficult for people to pull themselves out of it. So, you know, if a shift does start at 2 a.m. in the morning, it's right in the middle of when people normally are asleep and right in that biological circadian low. That operator is going to have a hard time and most likely is going to have higher levels of fatigue compared to somebody who does start a shift outside of that 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. time frame. And in the recommendations, actually, in the report, there is a bullet point saying that recommending those times should be avoided.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have a question before we wrap things up? Okay, just a couple notes. Because there were some of the slides on the pie charts were a little messed up, I'm going to go ahead and upload a PDF of the webinar slides onto the project page so that you'll have those to refer to. So that will be helpful. Plus, I'm guessing these are, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, but these are in the final report as well. Is that correct, Matt?
The slides actually are not. They can be for sure added as an appendix at the end of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just like the pie charts and things like that.
Oh yeah, the pie charts are, and they're taken straight from the report. I do apologize for that. When we were testing it earlier today, they worked just fine. So I don't know if it was some issue with transitioning from presentation to GoToMeeting. I'm not too sure, but yeah. But all those charts are in there, and feel free to add the presentation slides as well.
Okay, and then just on that note, one final thing I wanted to say is that we'd send out the draft final report for its review. So for the project subcommittee who's still on, each project subcommittee member still on the line, I did send out a request, a reminder to send in any comments you may have, and that was last week. So I haven't received any, so I'm going to send out one more final email today looking for any comments you may have, or your approval, or request for more time. I'm going to need that by tomorrow because we need to get this wrapped up. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again to everybody for joining in. Thank you to the research team for providing us such an excellent project and the presentation on it. And have a great rest of your day, everybody.